Good evening and welcome to the City of Lebanon Plan Commission meeting for Monday, August 20th, 2018. We'll start, Kelly, with roll call.
Matt Reynolds.
Here.
Ashley Paddock. Here. Kevin Krulik. Absent. John Lassley.
Here.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Gordon Perry.
Here.
Brian Tandy.
Here.
Jane Taylor. Corey Gross.
Here.
All right. All right. With that, have you all had a chance to review the minutes from last month's meeting? If you have and you don't see any problems or revisions needed to them, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. No old business, so we will jump right into new business tonight. Both docket items are public hearings, so if you plan to speak on either one of the docket items that we have tonight, we just need you to sign in over on the table here, and when you come forward to speak at the podium, if you just give us your name and address. Docket number 1820, Hendricks Commercial Properties. Ben, would you like to lead us through this?
Sure thing. Got a couple exciting projects to bring for you here tonight. We'll start off with Hendricks Commercial Properties, and this is a two-phase approval that they're requesting tonight. The first would be primary plat, and the second is the development plan approval. This is an approximately 18 or so acre parcel right at the northwest corner of Enterprise Drive and State Road 39. And they are looking to improve this with two speculative industrial buildings that would be able to be demised down to a size to attract some of our smaller industrial users that we're sorely lacking the space for in this community. Working on pulling up their renderings, so we can kind of walk through that. I'll give you a little bit of the property history here. This project did go before the Board of Zoning Appeals a couple of weeks ago for a couple of development standards variances, and those are highlighted in your staff report. The first was a variance on driveway width. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you can actually see it a little bit. They have two driveways, one that accesses off of State Road 39 and the other off Enterprise. One would be 40 feet and the other 34, just to allow them additional flexibility for truck access. The second one was corridor buffer. They're modifying the corridor buffer along State Road 39 slightly. They do have plantings as shown, but there is some flexibility there for the corridor buffer. Again, non-residential street buffer on Enterprise Drive. Again, just some flexibility where this parking on building 100 here, they do have significant plantings, but just some flexibility on the buffer width. Parking curbing, this impacts this center drive between the two buildings. What they're showing on either side of here is the ability to add parking if necessary, depending on the type of user that ends up occupying one of these buildings. So they have requested flexibility to not have to put in curbing in this area that could be expanded as parking as the site develops until they know whether they need the parking or not. And the final request, and this one's still got some outstanding items that we're working on with them, is variance to request relief from the sidewalk requirement. They were approved to eliminate the sidewalk on Enterprise Drive. There's some physical limitations there, as well as the fact there's no sidewalks to connect to. The Board of Zoning Appeals did want them to investigate whether there was some ability to put a sidewalk on State Road 39 to just increase some connectivity back to the main part of the community on the other side of the interstate. So we're going to work to connect with NDOT to see whether that's even feasible within their right-of-way. We're still working on that, so that's one outstanding item. So in terms of what we're doing here tonight, there's the primary plat, and this one doesn't necessarily show it, but this was two different parcels than what they're developing here. There was a large parcel, and then down at the very southeast corner there was a small parcel that I think had a barn on it at one point. So what they're doing in essence is combining those two parcels and then dividing right down the center of this access, so that there is some ability, if there is a single tenant that comes that wants to buy the entire building and property, that they would be able to do that, but still maintain shared access easements on this center drive. And I believe there's also some sort of access easement that runs along this north side, so they continue to have truck access. to both properties. So that's the primary plat. They have gone through TAC and been reviewed in terms of the primary plat requirements. They do have some comments from TAC. I know they have addressed many of them already. There may be a handful of outstanding there, but they have addressed all TAC comments. So the primary plat does meet ordinance requirements. And I will go through a couple highlights on the development plan here as well. So I don't know that I need to necessarily summarize their development standards and setbacks, et cetera, but just to let you know that they do meet all of the setback and lot size requirements of the Planned Business Industrial Zoning District. On the parking approval, certainly this is because this is a speculative project. They don't have tenants identified right now. What they've done is identified parking spaces appropriate for a building of this size, but they do have some flexibility to add parking in a couple of different locations depending on the end user. Our parking requirement is based on the number of employees, so until you know the actual tenant, it's a little hard to know exactly how many parking spaces you need. But they do have the flexibility to expand their parking in several different locations depending on the end user. So right now they have 80 spaces on building 1 and 99 on building 2. Actually, I think it's numbered a little differently here. But they do have the ability to add an additional 72 spaces as needed for final tenants. So they do have parking and truck parking for these properties, and then we'll have to work with them as their tenants are identified to make sure we've got the number of parking required as they pull the remodel and finishing permits for the building for the tenants. So as I mentioned, these are speculative. They're shell buildings, so they won't have anything improved on the interior. They won't even be putting in a floor until they know what their tenants' requirements are. So they will have to come in and pull building permits to finish the tenant spaces. So at that time, we can determine number of parking spaces necessary for that tenant and make sure that they have enough parking for the overall building. In terms of lighting and landscaping, they have provided us those plans and they do meet the requirements. As you can see in this colored site plan, they do have significant parking lot perimeter landscaping around the parking lots. They have provided a landscape screen around the west and north sides of the truck access area, in addition to outlet on State Road 39. This one doesn't show it, but they've added on another plan that they will provide an additional landscape screening along this east end of this building to screen the truck access area from State Road 39 as well. That would be evergreen plantings. This future drive will actually be installed at the current time for fire department access, and it will be paved at the current time. So that will be installed, whereas here it's shown as future. But we did work with the fire department. They did want to maintain 360-degree access around that building. So they will be installing that quote-unquote future drive now to make sure the fire department has access, and that will be paved. In terms of signage, again, this is speculative, so we don't know who the tenants are, but we just identified what the requirements are in terms of wall signage and ground signage for this property, and they'll be adhering to those requirements at such time that they'll be applying for sign permits when they have the tenants identified. Architectural review, I will pull up one of the building elevations for you so you can kind of see what we're looking at here. This top render here represents what the front of the building will look like. It'll have 4 prominent entrances for the potential tenant spaces. This does allow for this to be a single tenant building or demised up into potentially 4 tenant spaces. So they've got very prominent entrances. All the materials meet our requirements from the UDO. It does represent an attractive design. I actually drove past one of these buildings in Wisconsin on the way on vacation, so I've seen firsthand what this building looks like on the ground. It is an attractive building. Those are kind of the highlights. Staff recommendation, we have, I would actually suggest that you do two motions depending on what you choose to do. One would be a motion on the primary plat, and then the second one would be on the development plan. I figure it probably best to keep those separate. In terms of the development plan, there are a couple of conditions that we've placed on there that are conditions that would be familiar to you guys. The first is TAC comments, just to make sure that the applicant adequately addresses any remaining TAC comments prior to any building permits or site improvements. The second is stormwater approval, again, just making sure that they receive formal drainage approval from C11 Board of Works prior to building permits. And then the final one, and I mentioned it already, is the applicant works with staff and NDOT to determine if a sidewalk will be permitted in the state right-of-way along State Road 39 and where sidewalks should be located based on that discussion. So those are the three conditions that we placed on any approvals that you might do tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And on the east side, or the west side of the smaller building, they've provided access for fire trucks on the east side of the larger building. Fire department doesn't have any issue?
Yeah, my understanding is they did not have an issue with there not being 360. They would be able to access from the paved areas, both north and south, to any part of the building that they needed to be able to fight a fire.
And the driveway on that additional drive that they're putting in on the east side, is that curbed or not?
It would be curbed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think, well, let me clarify that a little bit. The one place where it may not be curbed is where there may be potential future parking on either side of the drive aisle, where they would just have some flexibility to install those parking spaces. Otherwise, though, it would be curbed.
Okay. Other questions for Ben?
What about the rooftop units?
With this being a speculative building, they don't have a location identified for units yet because it's going to depend on the user. We have made it very clear that those need to be screened per our ordinance, whether they're rooftop or ground mounted. But right now, they don't have a location.
Other questions for Ben? Would the applicant like to come forward and?
Yeah, I'm Aaron Hurt with Civil and Environmental Consultants, 530 East Ohio Street in Indianapolis. I was before some of you at the BZA hearing a few weeks ago. We have been working with staff. We resubmitted our drawings, construction documents for the TAC comments, and I feel like we've made good progress on those and just a few small remaining items, I think, to address. So we are working through those, and I think Ben did a good job of summarizing things, and be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant? So, all right. Thank you. This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to speak on these, we've kind of lumped these together, 1827 and 1820. One of them is plat and development plan, and the other one is a primary plat. I'll open it up for the first docket item, which is 1820, which is the preliminary plat, if anyone chooses to come forward. Everybody rush at once. Okay, seeing as how there are no one stepping forward, I'll close the public hearing for docket 1820 and open up the public hearing for 1827.
Actually, 1827 is a different project, yeah.
That's a different project. Okay. They keep mixing those up. All right. With the public hearing closed for 1820 for the primary plat, I would entertain, as Ben said, probably break this up into two motions, one for the primary plat and the other one for the development plan. Entertain a motion for the primary plat.
Question on that. With making the motion on the primary plat, are the TAC comments pertain to that plat approval, or is that just on the development plan?
It's probably most appropriate to attach those to the development plan.
Okay.
But most of those comments are related to that plan.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve docket 1820, approval of the primary plat as submitted.
You have a motion
Second.
and a second? Kelly, will you take it?
Matt Reynolds,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock. Yes. John Lastly,
Yes.
Keith Camel,
Yes.
Gordon Perry,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now for the second part of this, for the development plan approval, entertain a motion for it.
I make a motion to approve the development plan contingent on the following conditions: the TAC comments, that those are all addressed, the stormwater approval, and communication with NDOT on the sidewalk along 39.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Second that.
We have a second. Kelly?
Matt Reynolds,
Yes.
Ashley Paddock. Yes.
Yes.
Gordon Perry,
Yes.
Brian Tandy,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
All right.
John Lashley.
John, sorry.
All right. So docket 1820 is completed. So we'll move on to docket number 1827, Big Four Crossing project. Ben, would you care to get us the rest of the way?
Right. So procedurally, this is exactly the same as the last one we just discussed, but it's a very different project. So Big Four Crossing is a mixed-use project looking at developing just catty corner of this building. It's on Meridian Street on the west side. It involves what are now 5 different residential lots, which they will be combining. That's the primary plat application. The property is zoned central business, so it permits the mixed-use higher density. And what they're proposing is two 3-story buildings, the first floor being retail office, speculative space, and then the 2 upper floors would be multifamily apartments. This is a market rate project that's being proposed here, and I will pull up the plan. This site is also in our historic district. This project has already gone in front of the Historic Preservation Commission. They received a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of the 3 homes that are part of the project, as well as a certificate of appropriateness for the new construction that they're proposing. So let me find, not too far. That's what I want right there. So there are multiple components of this. The primary plat, again, those on the BZA have seen this already. The 2 buildings will be on the 4 southern lots. You've got 1 building that's right at the corner of Superior and Meridian. It faces Superior that you see represented here. So it has a retail storefront on Superior. Entrance to the residential units is from the rear of the building. You don't see them marked here, but there is parking that is provided behind the building here, as well as the dumpster location. As you're moving north, there is the second building that you see here that's facing Meridian Street, very similar in footprint to the first, with the retail spaces facing Meridian Street, access to the residential units from the rear towards the alley, and then parking and dumpster provided there. In order to meet the parking requirements, which were very important here, they did also propose a parking lot on the far north. This is adjacent to the south property line with CVS, so they're taking up that remaining parcel that's part of this project here to provide the required parking. I'll explain how the parking was calculated here in a second, but just wanted to kind of give you an overall how this project lays out. As part of the project, we will be burying the electric lines that are overhead right now that run through this east-west alley and then turn north through here. They will be buried. In addition, the sanitary line that essentially ends right here at the southern end of this alley, we're going to have to replace the manhole structure. It's a very old structure that half the folks in the city didn't even know existed anymore. And then also likely replacing the line moving north as well. That'll be replaced, so they'll create some additional capacity both for this project and one that's being proposed to the west. The alleys will be repaved and widened to create more safe and efficient access both for the folks that are driving and accessing these parking lots, but also for fire access if they ever need to get to the rears of these buildings. In addition, this is the location of the Big Four Trail that will come down South Meridian Street, so the 10-foot wide path will be installed as part of this project along the frontage here as well. So it's creating a very different, I think, streetscape than what you see out there now. Let me pull up, scroll down. This gives you an idea what the building will look like from the front here. As you see, a traditional urban downtown style building, 3 stories. It's got space for up to 4 tenants on the retail first floor, or it could be combined all into one depending on their needs. Then you can see there they've got 2nd and 3rd story apartments, some that do have balcony access. As I said, this has already gone through architectural review of the Historic Preservation Commission and approved. Primary materials are brick, cast stone, and then cement board siding, which all meet our requirements for our the central business district and the downtown overlay. And then kind of scrolling down, you'll see kind of from the side and rear of the buildings what those will look like. There's the other side. There's the rear, so you see the first floor is brick all the way around. This is a utility chase, and that'll be all bricked in. So on the 2nd and 3rd floors is the only place you'll see the cement board siding. Otherwise, it's all brick construction. So I will walk through then some of the high points of the staff report. This did go to the BZA a couple weeks ago. There are a handful of items that they just weren't able to meet the requirements. One is the requirement for residential street trees. It's required along any residential street. You have a street tree planted every 45 feet. In this case, the right-of-way doesn't accommodate a planting strip large enough to plant trees when we go to the 10-foot wide path. So if we're doing more of a standard 5 to 6 foot sidewalk, you'd have more of a 5 to 6 foot planting strip that is better to accommodate a tree. With it going to 10-foot wide, we're really only leaving about 2 to 3 feet between the sidewalk and the curb, so it's not large enough to accommodate trees. So they did get a variance approved to permit relief from that requirement along the frontage. The second is parking area setbacks. That north parking lot, in order to make sure we, 1, got the number of parking spaces required, and 2, made sure that we had a drive aisle that was sufficiently sized to provide safe travel through. They are angled parking spaces with essentially a one-way from west to east through the parking lot, but to make sure we had both the parking space size and then also the drive aisle requirement, they did need relief from the setback requirements on both the north and south property line, and that was approved. Then same with parking lot perimeter landscaping. They do have some landscaping provided, but it's not within the 5-foot planting strip that we require. So they do have shown some shrub plantings. The trees obviously don't fit in 2 feet, so they do have the shrub plantings, but not the tree plantings. So those are the 3 variances that were approved. They are working their way through the TAC comments. Again, I already mentioned some of the main utilities. The other thing they're working through is on the drainage. They are going to have to provide some underground drainage for the site because they are increasing the impervious surface from what was existing. So while it's an infill project, because they're increasing impervious surface, they are going to have to provide some detention underground in order to accommodate that additional impervious surface. They are working their way through some of those items. They have worked their way through many of them already and have addressed those comments back to city staff. In terms of the development standards, you can see here they do meet all of the required central business district standards. And in terms of parking, one of the big things we discussed from the start is that we absolutely had to meet the parking requirements of the central business district because there already is some relief allowed because you're in a more urban environment. We do permit a reduction in the number of parking spaces from a typical suburban site development because there are other options for parking in a downtown area. So in this case, again, the retail office space is speculative, so staff determined that they should provide 1 space for 250 square feet, and that's probably the most restrictive requirement. So if it became an office, they wouldn't need 1 space for 250 square feet, but we use that just in case it became like a coffee shop, which would have a higher parking requirement. And then in terms of residential, you can see the requirements there as 1.5 spaces for every 1 bedroom, and then everything larger than that requires 2 spaces, plus 1 additional space for every 7 units. So in calculating that, in addition, mixed-use developments like this, there's a shared parking calculation ratio that I can use to calculate. Basically what that says is, excuse me, at certain times of day there's going to be a higher demand for parking on the retail office portion than there would be residential. So like at noon on a Wednesday, there may be people that need those parking spaces going to an office that's there, but some of the folks that live in the residential units will not be there. So you do a percentage of the total required parking, you come up with a shared parking calculation. So doing that and using the reduction that's allowed in the central business district, they're required to have 35 spaces for these two buildings combined, and they have provided 37 spaces, so they do meet the parking requirement that was proposed to them. In terms of lighting, right now they don't have any freestanding lighting in the parking lots as proposed. They may have some wall-mounted lighting for the residential entrances to the back building, and they will have to meet the UDO requirements for that. Landscaping, they have provided landscaping that's required on the perimeter of the parking lots. You can see here they've got trees and shrubs on the north parking lot and trees and shrubs around the perimeter of the two parking lots associated with the buildings that you see here. Signage plan, let me go back to the front elevation. They've identified a sign that would, at the top of the building, that would be identify the actual project itself. This says Big Four Trail. I think it'll probably end up saying Big Four Crossing. And in the central business district, they're permitted up to 150 square feet for total wall signage on a building like this. So that's, they may work with the square footage on that sign that's there to maybe get a little smaller and make sure that there's plenty of signage, square footage for each of the tenants. But until those tenants are known, the only thing we know right now is maybe a Big Four Crossing sign here. But we'll definitely work with them to make sure they stay within the ordinance requirements for signage when those tenants come in. In terms of architectural review, I did mention that they already got the certificate of appropriateness through their Historic Preservation Commission, but the elevations they've proposed also meet any of the requirements of the UDO and the Downtown Overlay District. So from that perspective then, again, this is very similar to the last one. There's a primary plat that needs to be approved because they are combining a couple of lots to accommodate the buildings. And then the second will be development plan. And staff is recommending, has determined that they are compliant with the UDO in terms of both the primary plat and development plan, subject to the following conditions for the development plan. Again, these are the standard ones that they finalize and adequately address all remaining TAC comments, and then stormwater approval from the Board of Works. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Couple for you, Ben. You mentioned in the front view there, or along Meridian Street, there's a 10-foot path.
Yes.
And typically there'd be a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk, and it leaves you room to grow. So does 10 feet take up the whole space, or is it 10-foot path and then there's an additional 2 or 3 feet that we're just concreting over? Or?
Yeah, there will be 2 to 3 feet that would be turf between the curb and before the path starts. Okay. And then the path would then be the 10 feet from there all the way up to the building face.
So there's going to be this 2 or 3 foot strip where we're going to try to get grass to grow.
So the trail,
as long as there's dirt, right?
the trail and the sidewalk will be one.
Yes, in this place it'll be a combined.
Okay.
A little bit different than what's happening around the square, but
Okay.
Okay, and then
this will be more like the East Street path that they've put in on the west side there of East Street.
And then the underground stormwater detention. Who's responsible for that?
That would be it's a private detention facility, so they'd be responsible for maintaining that.
And I probably missed it in the drawings and such, in the renderings that you were showing. That was on Meridian Street. You said there was on Superior Street there was an entrance. Did I miss that?
Yeah, there's 2 standalone buildings. One that faces Superior, and then as you go north, then there's one that faces Meridian.
Is there a drawing of the facade for that?
They're almost carbon copies of each other. The footprint is slightly different on one to accommodate some 3-bedroom apartments on the first floor. Otherwise, the front facade is the same.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Ben?
Kind of piggyback on Gordon's first one on the trail. Do we lose any width of Meridian Street? Will that curb to curb stay the same?
No, this would be the existing curb line. There's enough right-of-way outside of the curb line in order to accommodate a 10-foot path and a small grass strip. Otherwise, we're not changing the width of Meridian Street at all.
And the parking numbers that you gave, I think you said 35?
Yes.
Does that include the north lot?
Yes, that's the
number
combined
does.
total parking spaces.
Okay.
Ben, I'm not a big fan of the 2 to 3 feet, as you know. I mean, in front of a building like that, it is going to be in the front, correct?
Yes.
Just grass.
That's really all that will grow there. If there's concern about whether it even grow there and it just needs to be all paved, I mean, we're open to that too, I guess. I mean, I don't know that it necessarily makes any difference to me, but yeah, there's approximately 2 to 3 feet between the path and the curb line.
So how do we suggest that be something other than grass, because that's not going to grow there?
Okay. Yeah, we can take a look at that with them if it
Brick
becomes like
pavers or
a
something.
paver or
I'm
something
not,
like that.
you know, I wouldn't be, personally, I wouldn't be interested in having an additional 2 or 3 feet of concrete. It just becomes this Pan-American highway in front of this new development, so, but grass isn't gonna grow there.
Sure. Okay. We can take a look at some sort of paver treatment or something like
Something.
that, you know, when people open their car doors that are parked there, they have somewhere to kind of land when they get out of their car.
Yeah. It's parallel parking along there still, right?
Yeah.
Do we know how many spaces will be in front of each building?
It's probably no more than 3 or 4.
Okay.
Because the parallel parking space needs to be 22 feet long. So, I mean, I could probably run a quick calculation, but it
No,
can't
but
be
those
any
lots are
more than-
50 feet wide, so you're talking about 2 spaces.
So if by combining the lots, they become 120 feet wide, so you're talking about 5-ish spaces in front of each building.
And we don't have any issues with rerouting the utilities underground within our alleys and all that good stuff.
No, it's actually fairly straightforward in this case. We have the space to be able to bury the electric lines that will serve both this property and any future development to the west of them. And then by replacing that sanitary line that's still an old 8-inch tile, we'll be able to have plenty of capacity for both their side and anything to develop to the west of them on the other side of the alley.
Where's the water?
Water is on both, I want to say it's on Meridian and Superior. So there's plenty of water. They'll be able to loop
But
it.
it'll be underneath the sidewalk, right?
I'm not sure the exact location right now, but I believe it is on both streets.
Other questions for Ben?
Yeah, I got a question. It's outside of their control, but as far as the city is concerned, would that turn into 2-hour parking like the rest of the business district?
I don't know off the top of my head if we would do 2-hour parking that far off the square or not. I think it was probably something we'd monitor to see if it becomes a challenge down through that area. With there being residents on both sides, my guess is we probably wouldn't unless there became some sort of issue.
Yeah. And but what about parking then? Would we leave it wide open, do you think, or?
Would the parking be wide open?
Right, or would we mark it, would we mark the spaces so?
I would
okay.
like it where we know that there will be definitely on-street parking for something that's more of a higher intensity use than what's there now. I would like to see the city stripe the parking spaces so it's a little bit less of a free-for-all parking out there and it's a little bit more organized. So that is definitely something we'll be looking at.
Okay.
Did I hear you correctly on the parking lot that they're not going to have it lighted?
Right now, it's not proposed to be a lit parking lot.
Why would that be? That doesn't make any sense.
That's a question you'll have to ask the applicant.
Yeah.
Utility relocation, how will the neighboring homes be affected during that part of the project?
So the homes on the east side, I don't think will be significantly affected. It will basically go from the pole that's on the east side of Meridian. We'll bury it underneath Meridian. So really, in this case, I think the only person we'll have to look into is the remaining home that's on Meridian and CVS. I believe they're all served from that line. So we'll have to organize the switch over at a time that it's least impactful to those people.
Okay. Barring any other questions for Ben, would the applicant like to step forward and share any additional information?
Hi, my name is Chris Edwards. My address is 12543 Marina View Drive, Indianapolis, Indiana. And this?
I'm Chris Hinkle. I'm with C Group. We are the engineers and surveyors on the project, 494 Gradle Drive in Carmel.
Great. Any other information that you want to share with us that maybe somehow Ben doesn't do it very often, but he doesn't overlook anything?
I guess the main point is we have been working with the planning department probably for about 9 months on this particular project. Very closely, I've always felt warm reception in terms of trying to serve this particular part of the community and increasing the number of apartments in the downtown area. So just in terms of enthusiasm, it's very high on my side, and I'm anxious to move forward.
All right.
And I don't know, Chris, maybe, I know we have a question about the lighting. Should we field that?
Go
Yes,
right
please.
ahead.
Okay.
I think right now we have been working with staff on our lighting, trying to figure out, we don't have our final detailed drawings 100% complete. So that's something that we can certainly take into consideration to look at lighting, especially in that isolated north parking lot. Kind of the same thing goes with the 2 or 3 foot grass strip out in front. I know that that has been brought up before as to whether or not grass will be able to grow in there. So I think that that's something we'd be able to work with staff to come up with an acceptable solution on that as well.
Indicate no lighting in that northern lot. Will you have the back lots behind the structures?
Yeah, currently everything that is proposed is building based for the
Okay.
lighting.
Perfect.
I guess the other question I would have is that one remaining home are you guys looking at options for that, or it has nothing to do with what we're going to pass a motion on, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and the answer is yes. We're in ongoing conversations with Mr. Cully, who owns that particular property. The thought would be, once this development plan is approved, if it is, and the closing on the other properties happen, then we immediately go into a conversation with Mr. Cully to finalize, hopefully, the purchase.
So it would be another building that would be similar in style to that. That additional space wouldn't, you would be able to accommodate parking behind that kind of, parking wouldn't be an issue by adding another facility?
Yeah, correct. So what you end up having is a half of the proposed building that we're talking about today on that particular lot, and then behind that immediately there is parking that would suffice for that particular property. So in total, although it's beyond the scope of this particular project, we have contemplated being able to fill the parking needs with just what's behind the building.
So it's on the radar where
Yeah.
you're going. I only say that because I share the same profession as your consultant there, as a professional land surveyor, and I'd hate to see you guys get locked into something and then all of a sudden it doesn't, that next piece becomes available, but it doesn't fit.
Yeah, completely agree.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thanks.
Again, this is a public hearing, so I will open this part of the meeting up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this docket number, please sign in and step forward. Okay, I think I've met the required time because nobody's coming forward. I'll close the public portion of the meeting, and again, ask the commission if there are any questions for
I
Ben.
just have the one again. On the parking lot, I'm a little confused what you said. I'm not so sure you agreed that at some point you'll have it lit. I can't imagine you having a parking lot with no lights on it.
Yeah, I think right now we have not submitted a detailed lighting plan. We're still working with staff on trying to come up with what those specific kinds of lights would be and where they will be located. So I think that that's something that we can certainly take into consideration, that we need, kind of similar to the grass strip, it's like, okay, we need to make sure that we have that addressed as well. So the lighting on the north lot will make sure that we're addressing that appropriately with staff.
One thing we'll need to take a look at, because as Gordon mentioned, the lot in between, because that's a residential lot, there's some pretty significant requirements about light spillage. So it actually may be a challenge to create much significant lighting, so we may have to look and see. I know there's probably some ambient light coming from CVS, but we may have to take a look and see whether they're able to provide some lighting maybe on the north side of the parking lot or something like that to give some lighting and security up there. But we need to make sure there's not light spillage on the home that right now is not part of this development. But we can definitely work with them to come up with an appropriate plan.
I'm saying, can we make that as a condition as we go through?
Yes, absolutely. And
That way we know some light's going in there.
right.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, again, we will do this in two motions. First one for the primary plat.
I'll motion we approve docket 1827 for the primary plat as submitted.
I'll second.
Kelly?
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock? Yes.
John
Lashley?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Gordon Perry?
Yes.
Brian Tandy?
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Okay. Now for the second part, for the development plan. Looking for a motion on the development plan.
I'll do that one too. Motion we approve 1827 development plan as presented, pending the applicant adequately addresses the remaining TAC comments and also receives formal approval from the Stormwater, or Board of Public Works, I'm sorry, as well as the lighting, how we want to word that.
Just adequate lighting plan
adequately.
meeting UDO requirements. Yeah.
What Ben said.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Okay.
Kelly?
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock? Yes. John Lashley?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Gordon Perry?
Yes.
Brian Tandy?
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Great. Great. So, other business, we don't have anything listed here. Our next meeting will take place on Monday, September 17th, 2018. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Move with, for motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, and good evening.